I just recently finished the remake of Sherlock Holmes Awakening. The game is created by Frogware, a Ukrainian studio, which have been making Sherlock Holmes games since 2002. But it was in 2007, Sherlock Holmes Awakening, the first one, that was my introduction to their games. And since then I have played all of them, and loved some and disliked others. But there is something about the series that just always draws me back to it. Notably, I was not a big fan of Chapter 1's gameplay. My biggest gripes were the combat and the open world. I felt the combat didn't work well with the style, and the open world was poorly optimized, and the gameplay just wasn't working well enough for me. And I felt it was detracting from what the series has always been about, which is solving mysteries. We were still solving mysteries in Chapter 1, but now I just had to run for a longer time to get wherever I needed to go. But now with the remake of the 2007 Awakening, it is time to ask if it's worth playing. Hopefully in this video, as we look into the story, the visuals, the audio, and the gameplay, by the end you will be able to say if this game is worth your valuable time. So let's start with the story. This is a sequel to Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 that released in 2021, and while there are occasional references to the previous game, they are not linked enough to require you to play the original before this one. The story is the same as the original 2007 game, though polished up and, in my opinion, better delivered, showing off how Frogware has matured in their storytelling. If you did play the original, you will find yourself in familiar places and meeting old and new characters. Frogware at the moment seems to be trying to present a more human Sherlock than in the original game. This is a younger Sherlock who is not just a brilliant mind. He shows a variety of emotions, and his great intellect also comes with their drawbacks. He is a surprisingly likable character, and he makes a really good match with this game's John Watson, who is acted as a balance against the chaos that is Sherlock. The story is based in the Lovecraftian universe, focusing on the themes of madness, mystery, and the price one is willing to pay for the truth. The game is focused on a singular case which winds itself up into something far more dark and twisted than it first seems. And as you play through it, each area also offers an optional side case to work with. These are usually very simple, and calling them cases is being quite generous. But still going on a scavenger hunt for dolls, seeking out places where people meet their end, or figuring out if a guy was actually talking to the gods, or just adding posters to Sherlock's collection, these little side activities provide a fun, albeit short diversion. Overall, the game took me about 12 hours to finish, and I was left satisfied and wanting more. For some it might feel on the shorter side, but I believe it's better for a game to be slightly too short than too long. Leaving your player feeling frustrated and bored with an overly long game generally leads to a bad experience. Sometimes less is more, and I feel this time Frogware really struck a good balance. Now let's talk about the visuals. The game has taken the foundation of the visuals of Chapter 1 and improved upon them. The most notable change is the lack of large open world. Instead, each area is now something closer to a small neighborhood or several streets. This has led to a better performance, along with making the game more visually interesting. Each area is well themed and distinct, as we travel from the dreary and rainy city of London to the warm city of New Orleans, out to the bayou, and into some disturbing institutions. And when the game enters into the more Lovecraftian areas, the developer's creativity truly shines. The areas are just wrong, and at times absolutely breathtaking, especially when looking at the skyboxes. And while there are some truly gruesome scenes in the story, it was more the subtle visual hints of wrongness that had me on my toes. Things that nobody was mentioning, but I kept on noticing as recurring themed in the different places. John and Sherlock's appearance changes throughout the game as we observe them take on the horror and madness of the case. The characters have visual changes representing their situation and feelings. That includes several canonical wardrobe changes that truly match the area and situation. And I did not notice any notable visual bugs outside of a peculiar flickering of the facial hair in the clothing menu. But this did not translate into the gameplay itself, so it wasn't an issue to me. Now, I was glad to see they did bring their more cinematic flair to the visuals around dialogues and cutscenes from Chapter 1. It makes these scenes more interesting to watch and genuinely engaging, and also adds to the feeling of wrongness and madness as you progress through the game. Overall, I think the game runs and looks nice. There are nice attentions to detail, and the smaller areas are a good improvement, and the developers really show off their creativity. Now the sound. The game treats players to a well-crafted audio experience. The subtle background music fitting the different scenes is rarely noticeable, but still vital to set the mood. Then the sound of rain or other environmental sounds make the world feel pleasant and alive. When entering into the more Lovecraftian areas, the background music and sound design add onto the feeling of things not being quite right. Later on, as you start hearing disturbing chants, screams or whisperings, it all adds to the eldritch horror, while also not being overly overbearing. Now, Sherlock's voice actor returns from Chapter 1 to reprise his role, and does so excellently, managing to nicely depict both the underlying arrogance of Sherlock and also his anxiety and full-on fear as things start getting out of hand. This is paired with the voice actor for Watson, who I feel was a perfect match for the role, and paired really well with Sherlock. Both did an excellent job making the audio experience nice and clear, and at no point did I require subtitles to understand them. And being somebody who at times can struggle with understanding some spoken language, it was very nice. Other characters were very well voiced, and generally I was pleased, though they did bring back the peculiar mumbling of some of the NPCs, and to me it still sounds off and honestly is just not to my taste. I would rather they would say just something repetitive or just be quiet, but that is simply the style they decided to go with. But overall I have no complaints about the sound design, and you could balance it nicely through the menus. And now let's talk about the gameplay. I found the gameplay to be good, though with some quirks to it. First of all, the gameplay is in most ways the same as other Sherlock Holmes games. You are in an area where something happened, you explore, you deduce from the clues and solve the case. The notebook does make its return, and with it the clue pinning system from Chapter 1. So if you want to ask one of those set-dressing NPCs anything, you must first pin the clue so Sherlock knows to ask it. The same can also apply to being able to see certain clues or follow up on some leads. The correct piece of clue or evidence must be pinned. And while at times I find this kinda annoying, especially because the clues take up so big part of the screen when you have them pinned, but thankfully, like in Chapter 1, any clue that needs pinning for something are clearly marked in the notebook. Now, different from the previous games, there are no distinction between the cases. While clues to side cases do vanish from the notebook after you finish them, they are simply mixed in with your main case in that area until it's finished, making it sometimes a little bit frustrating to sort through the clues and figure out what applies to which case. The mind map also makes its return, but is quite different from the previous iteration. Now it's split into individual questions, which Sherlock or John are trying to answer. To answer the question, you will require a certain amount of clues, which are split into documents, or items, or witness testimony, for example. These types are color-coded, and each question shows you the colors you need. You simply link the correct evidence to the question, and Sherlock will figure it out. This is very different from previous iterations, where you would usually have to connect two clues together, make a deduction, and then add them to your mind map. Usually make a second deduction from there, to link them all together. I honestly did not mind this. I could definitely see some of the long-term fans of the series being disappointed. Now, there are occasional minigames and puzzles Sherlock and Watson must solve. This includes searching for information in files, lockpicking, and solving the sequence in a crime scene. As a player, you have freedom to customize your difficulty, choosing how much or little assistance you get, giving you 3 difficulty options, from getting all the help, none of the help, or mix and matching as you desire. Another feature that made its return is the wardrobe. And honestly, I am not sure why this one is back. While in the wardrobe, you have the option of beards and a variety of clothing, the only time the game requires Sherlock to wear a disguise, the game chooses the disguise for you, and locks you out of changing your outfit. In fact, some of the chapters straight out lock you out of the clothing system. And with chapter changes and sometimes scene changes actually changing your outfit to fit the story, I saw no point in really dressing up John or Sherlock. And as you never have to make a disguise, I'm not sure why the system is there. It feels like it's something that just came along because it was there in the previous games, but it really holds no value. I do feel it was a big miss to not let us make Sherlock's disguise the one time disguise was required. And I think it would simply have been better to not have the wardrobe in there at all. But overall, I found the gameplay to be fun and engaging, and while it has some minor frustrating moments, I had fun through the entire thing, and kept on wanting to play, which was very nice. Overall, I found the gameplay to be fun, and while there were some frustrating moments, I found it to be overall pleasant and allowed me to do what I wanted to do. So, is it worth playing? For me, it was definitely worth playing. It surpasses Chapter 1 by addressing flaws from that game, but taking things that were actually good from it, and deliver a mostly polished and enjoyable experience. The smaller areas allow the game to run better, and the variety of locations show off the developer's creativity. The story had me absolutely captivated from early on, and I had a really hard time putting the game down, constantly wanting to just go back to it to figure out what would happen next. I would recommend this game to long-term fans of the series, or those interested in some crime solving and mystery. And if you enjoy Lovecraftian themes, this might be right up your alley. It might not be very scary, but it definitely has a charm to it. But tell me, what do you think? Is this game worth playing for you, and will you try it out? Let's talk about it in the comments, and while you head down there, do the holy trinity of appeasement to our eldritch algorithm gods by liking, subscribing, and pressing that silly notification bell that I don't think necessarily work. But whatever you end up doing, I hope you have a lovely day.